The shonen bad boy, a drunkard with a kind heart. His entire strength lives in that blade filled with a promise to endlessly see a dream to the end. In this world, one big promise, one big dream is simply not enough. A fearless dreamer who smiles at death, and the heart and spirit of a forgotten homeland tie dreams to Zoro. Bitter, meaningless loss haunts his dream. She is part of him. He will be her dream. What the fuck? Could this be read as a trans allegory or something? Whatever, that's a different video. While we see important aspects of Zoro's character outside of Mortal Kombat, it is in the heat of battle where Zoro is the most emotionally uneven. It is when his anxieties beg to pour out, but his conviction for his and everyone's dreams forces him into a situation where he must grow in order to keep his, and thus the dream of his friends and ancestors, alive. The rational fear that is anxiety crumbles away because his conviction erases all fear. And because fear is a mechanism of protection, it ultimately limits Zoro on what he can achieve. So when he tears down that wall, new possibilities emerge. Being a massive Zoro fan automatically lumps you in with the most illiterate One Piece fans, power scalers. And I'm not here to dump on the power scaling community. They know they're illiterate. They wear their lack of reading as a badge of honor. Let's leave them alone while they whittle away at their little puzzles. Yay! You did it! You're such a big boy. Daddy's proud of you. Now that they're distracted, was that nice of me? That was the first time a caretaker ever showed them any genuine pride in their abilities. I'm just joking, power scalers, you guys are fine. His growth and strength as a swordsman parallels a selfless love and appreciation of his childhood friend, his crew and captain, and his ancestors. He understands that their dreams are as important as his own dream, and that his dream is utterly impossible to achieve without their dreams being realized as well. Zoro represents the strength of bonds, not only forming new bonds, but deepening his appreciation to his existing bonds as well. And Oda writes Zoro's character, which on the surface level is a typical shonen fighting badass protagonist, with these bonds and their deepening connections as intrinsically tied to his swordsmanship and his development of all three forms of haki. And one thing I love about Zoro is that he kind of reminds me of an adult version of my childhood love for Dragon Ball Z. Mihawk, Daz Bones, Kuma, and King. So I'm going to show you how awesome and deep the character of Zoro is. On chapter 50 of the One Piece manga, Zoro comes up against Dracula Hawkeye Mihawk, the greatest swordsman in the world, and at this point, Zoro knows he has no chance of realistically winning, but his conviction and his drive for his dream forces him to challenge Mihawk regardless of that reality. To truly chase your dream is to do so knowing that the odds are against you, knowing that reality is far crueler than the dream you fight for. Fighting for a dream is the entire purpose of living. And chapter 50 and 51 are some of my favorite chapters of One Piece, because this is where Zoro truly learns what the world's greatest swordsman is. What Shanks is to Luffy, Mihawk is to Zoro. Mihawk might as well be teaching him some lessons in this fight. Immediately, Mihawk deflects some bullets fired at him, and Zoro says, hey, shooting at him is useless because he'll just deflect the bullets with a sword. And Mihawk says, without subtlety, a sword is but an iron bar, which means that a master swordsman needs control, precision, and a will to cut what they want to cut. If you're a competent swordsman, you don't need to cross swords to know that I surpass your puny skills. Does the courage to point your blade at me come from confidence or ignorance? And Zoro responds, it comes from ambition and a promise to a friend. And remember the power of promises in One Piece. How often is Luffy making a promise to somebody in the first act of an arc to only fulfill that promise in the pivotal moment to where that stress is relieved and Luffy answers their prayers by fulfilling the promise? What is the song of pirates, Binks Brew, but a story of searching to fulfill a promise? What about the promise that Joy Boy left to Poseidon on Fishman Island? What about the promise to open Wano to the world? If there's one thing I know about One Piece, there is a promise within finding the One Piece, within Luffy's dream and Joy Boy's dream and Roger's dream. There is a promise for people to meet someone or something else again, something that's been promised for tens of thousands of years, that no amount of oppression, no void century, no hatred can ever hope to stop the power of a promise fueled with ambition. On chapter 50, the last page, is Nami looking out onto the horizon on the deck of a ship she just stole, saying, "I can't wait to be free, Bellemere." It was a promise that Bellemere gave her life to give to Nami. A promise to live, to find friends, to meet people, to chase her dream. And it reminds me of the promise that Robin made with Olvia, her mom, and Saul, that she would promise to live and go out there and survive, because surely out there somewhere were friends that would love her and protect her. And the strength of that promise one day manifested in meeting the Straw Hats, meeting Luffy. And even though she fought against that promise at one time, inside her heart, that ambition was so strong that it could not be stopped. And that power ultimately led Luffy and the Straw Hats to destroy her oppressors, liberating Robin, and finally delivering that happiness that her mom died for. Getting back to Zoro, we go to chapter 51, one of my favorite chapters ever. I fucking love this chapter. The whole time, Mihawk's just talking shit. Zoro's pretty excited, even though he's about to get his ass beat, and he knows it. And Mihawk pulls out a fucking butter knife for hunting rabbits, because the world of One Piece is big. It's divided. Just because you're the big bad dog in the East Blue means nothing. There are 3 other seas out there and 2 halves of the Grand Line, and not to even mention what is on top of the Red Line itself. And Zoro charges in with all the strength that he's gained by growing in this little pond as a little frog, croaking in his puddle. His absolute strength and determination is not great enough to overcome the ambition of the greatest swordsman in the world right now. It's not enough to overcome the subtlety and precision of somebody who truly lives by the sword. Mihawk is completely unfazed. Zoro is shocked when confronted with the massive gap in their abilities. He's coming to terms with his nature as a little frog in a little pond, and this ultimately reinforces his conviction to follow Luffy around the world, to leave his pond and grow into something much greater than a little frog. He thinks of Kuina, who wished that she was a boy, because boys are stronger, but that strength in being a boy doesn't really mean much to Zoro right now. His strength is not why he's losing, it's his skill, it's his knowledge, it's his conviction. Zoro's dream emerged on the tiny, isolated island in the East Blue in relative comfort and safety. The inversion is that the relative safety sourced from its tiny landmass and the endless dangerous waters around it creates a prison of sorts for people who were born there. The refugees who settled on this island likely saw this tiny piece of rock as a utopia from the horrors that they survived. This utopia is for adults, but children who know nothing of the wider world dream of leaving this tiny rock. Utopian safety and comfort is real until it is not. One dangerous pirate, one corrupt marine officer, one natural disaster can shatter the illusion. Only a couple meters of a rising sea level would bury the entire island. But ultimately, a single, random, meaningless, unfortunate event shatters the illusion of utopia for Zoro. He couldn't even be the strongest swordsman on this island. His best friend dominated him. His raw passion for the sword crumbled in the face of her love for swordsmanship. The cruel reality she believed in told her that her dream to become the greatest blade master in the world was impossible. she would become a woman and men would overwhelm her swordsmanship with raw power and strength. She believed in the values of society that made her smaller than she truly was or could be. But Zoro never believed it. He knew she was greater than he was, and every day he wanted to surpass her. He weaves their dreams together to make something greater than one person's dream. Alone, her dream couldn't stand up against the walls of cultural expectations and the laws of nature that she learned. These laws come from a closed nation. A tiny group of people fled that country and settled on this tiny rock, and that is all she could know. The illusion crushed her dream, but tying her dream to someone she sees as essentially a reflection of herself brightens hope in her spirit. She wants to be the strongest swordsman in the world. Zoro demands that they live to fulfill that promise, that one of them will see that dream through to the end. See, part of his development in these moments is coming to terms with understanding really what his promise means, really what his conviction means. And while he's thinking about his past, while he's thinking about his conviction, Mihawk asks him, "What drives you? Why do you fight so hard when you know you cannot win? You're a weakling." And Zoro doesn't say anything to this. He just keeps fighting, something that Luffy understands and agrees with. And when Zoro goes for his last strike, he thinks of Luffy. The King of the Pirates needs the world's greatest swordsman. The world's greatest swordsman has to be part of the King of the Pirates crew. And he's thinking, that's right. The King of the Pirates is my way out of this little pond. If I sail with him, I could see everything. I could face everyone. And inevitably, my dream will be realized. And Zoro is stabbed right in the chest by this dagger, blood spewing out. But Zoro doesn't take a step back. He stands there, pressing forward, unable to do anything. If he retreats even a single step, his vow, his ambition, everything he cares about, everything he lives for, it'll be destroyed. He says, all my dreams will be lost forever. And Mihawk says, yes, that's defeat. And Zoro says, so I can't retreat. Mihawk says, even if it means death, I prefer death to defeat. And this is what changes Mihawk's mind about this guy. It had nothing to do with his skills. It's his conviction to live for this dream, to understand that backing down, to stop moving forward towards that dream, that's defeat. Dying is not defeat. Because if he keeps moving forward, Zoro will live on and on and on forever. What happens when you die? In One Piece, souls are real. At one's death, their soul leaves their body and goes to another world, in theory. But what if Kuena's soul, or a piece of her soul, ached for that promise to be fulfilled so powerfully that it stuck around to ensure that the promise is realized one day? When Zoro becomes the strongest swordsman in the world, a piece of her soul, the essence of their promise, stays with Zoro the entire journey within her blade, the Wado Ichimonji. He honors Zoro by pulling out his black blade, the finest in the world. Zoro prepares his most powerful attack he knows, and Mihawk charges in to give Zoro a meaningful death, a death where his dream will move on and on and on. And then Mihawk realizes Zoro is not waiting there, getting ready to parry Mihawk's attack for a chance for a counterattack. Zoro's the one initiating the attack. This ambition is shocking to Mihawk. And Zoro moves right past Mihawk, never laying a finger on him, but Mihawk destroys him in the midst of it regardless. Even though Mihawk destroyed Zoro here, it was Zoro who never stopped going forward, who never hesitated. His swords are destroyed, symbolizing a form of destruction where Zoro can rebuild himself from the swordsman he is in this moment into what will be known as the world's greatest swordsman 2 years from this point. He holds out his arms, asking for the final blow right over his heart. And we all know Sanji fucking loves Zoro. And Zoro's actions here change Sanji a little bit, right? He gets him on the steps to chasing his dream as well. He went up against the world's best. He never had a chance. He'd rather die than give up. He yells out to Zoro, "Abandon your stupid dream." And after Luffy saves Zoro from drowning after their duel, Mihawk leaves Luffy and Zoro with some parting words. It's too soon for you to die. Discover yourself, see the world, and grow strong, Zoro. And I really want you to think about that. Discover yourself. And Zoro's at the door of death, but he's presumably going to be okay at this point, right? He says, Luffy, can you hear me? Were you worried? If I fail to become the world's greatest swordsman, you'll be disappointed, right? Why would Luffy be disappointed? Well, it's because Luffy needs the world's greatest swordsman to achieve his own dream. That's what Zoro thought about right before doing his final attack. And he says, I will never lose again, augmenting his promise with Kuina with a promise to Luffy to be the world's greatest swordsman, not solely for himself, not solely for Kuina, but also for Luffy to achieve his dream. A dream he doesn't even know, by the way, but he probably kinda knows it because he understands the type of man that Luffy is. And Mihawk acknowledges that these two are a formidable team. Support me for $1 a month on Patreon. I've been releasing regular exclusive content, and all my revenue on Patreon for this month goes towards mutual aid for Palestinians. Chapter 195, Mr. Bushido, where Zoro faces his first real test since his encounter with Mihawk. Mr. 1, Daz Bones, an assassin with a body made of steel because his body itself is a blade. Without currently knowing hockey, Zoro cannot hurt him because he cannot cut steel. And when we think back to the lessons that Mihawk told Zoro, this is a very important step on Zoro's path to becoming the world's greatest swordsman. This is where he understands how to cut what he wants to cut and how to move through what he does not want to cut. In the previous chapter, Zoro thought back to his past, his lessons of the sword. He knows he's pushed himself harder than anyone, but he's lacking something. So he thinks back, he's reaching for it. He's reaching for anything that brings him closer to his dream. As a child, Zoro was baffled that there are people in the world who could cut steel. And his mentor shows a lesson by tossing a piece of paper into the air and trying to slice it with his sword. And the paper is not cut by the sword. He says, listen, Zoro, there are swordsmen in this world who are able to not cut anything. These same swordsmen have the ability to cut through steel. And with that same instrument, the pinnacle of swordsmanship is the power to protect what one wants to protect and cut what one wishes to cut. So the power of a swordsman comes from having other people, having bonds to fight for. Obviously, Zoro already has the bond with Kuina, but here in a second, we're going to have him start really thinking about his entire crew, what they're doing, how they're doing, that he misses them. And in this flashback, his sensei says, do you understand? Zoro doesn't give him an answer. He doesn't understand what it means that a blade that injures all that it touches isn't really a sword. In the next chapter, Mr. Bushido says, I don't know what it all means, but to push and keep pushing, that is the true way of the sword. The fight against Mr. Wood does not go very well. Zoro gets diced up, so to speak, and falls to his belly. He tells himself, don't turn your back on it. Because as we know from his fight with Mihawk, turning your back in a sword fight is a mark of shame, the defeat of your dream. The pillar behind Zoro collapses on top of him, and on his back, he looks at the sky. Mr. One walks away in defeat, turning his back on Zoro. Zoro stands up to face him at the edge of death, and Zoro wonders, I wonder if the others are okay. He bonds his dream with the dreams of his friends, his family, the people he cares about and loves. That's the power that lets him stand up. Mr. One is baffled. How could you possibly stand up? How did you dodge all that falling rubble? Zoro looks to the sky. He thinks to himself, dodge? No, that's not it. I knew where the stones wouldn't fall. Zoro's starting to understand his will, and this is an expression of observation hockey. He could even sense that his sword is under that rock. He says to himself, I know it. Zoro thinks to himself as he picks up his sword from beneath that rock, I've had this feeling before. Everything around me was eerily silent. My heartbeat was like distant thunder. It was like standing at the gates of Hades. The falling rocks, I could feel something alive in them. Not just a presence, something more distinct, like breathing. Trees with heartbeats of their own, The earth itself breathing. Is this it? He thinks back to the words of his sensei. Listen, Zoro, there are swordsmen in this world who are able to not cut anything. In this moment, his master is teaching him that a true swordsman needs to use observation haki to see the world for what it truly is, to understand the presence of everything. To not cut anything, is that like hearing the breathing? Is this the power to cut steel? Mr. One is like, what are you trying to do? What is this trick that you're playing on me? You've lost too much blood. You're already dead, don't you know? Zoro looks at him, and he doesn't respond to Daz Bones. He says, I could hear it, the breathing of his steel. He senses the steel within Daz Bones. Zoro precisely slices his sword at a tree branch near him, and it whacks the tree branch, but does not cut it. And in that same swing, his sword falls to a rock nearby, and perfectly, precisely slices it in half. He points the sword at Daz Bones and thinks to himself, all that's left is for me to find whether I possess the power to cut through steel. One sword, one strike, lion strike. And Zoro blitzes through him, cutting steel and ending Daz Bones in one clean fight. The first major hurdle to becoming the world's greatest swordsman has been overcome, and he achieves this by understanding things outside of him. Remember, this growth, this development initially was kicked off by thinking back to how his friends were doing, hoping that they're doing okay. And with that presence of mind, he finally was able to think more clearly about what he learned all those years ago. And with that perception, he could cut what he wants to cut, and he could not cut what he doesn't want to cut. One thing that's really kind of funny and interesting about Zoro is because of these huge developments in his character throughout a fight, these powerful enemies that kind of dominate him, they get their ass whooped by him and they're like, I kind of love this dude. This Zoro guy is pretty fucking awesome. Which is basically how I and we all feel. They appreciate him because they themselves have worked their ass to the bone to get to the power that they have. And then this guy who carries around 3 swords and sticks one in his mouth, which has got to be pretty weird. Freud would have some things to say about that. But to them, this weird guy who's pretty strong but significantly below them, all of a sudden just grows throughout the fight and passes barriers that they thought were impossible for him or maybe even anybody to surpass. And at the end, they're not like trying to argue with the ref. They're just like, I can't believe it, but you got my ass. His blade is more than just a force of destruction. It's a tool to fulfill a promise. It's a tool to fulfill dreams. The next major moment of Zoro's development is the confrontation with the tyrant, Bartholomew Kuma, the warlord of the sea, and Luffy is currently down for the count. Zoro is injured, the Straw Hats are injured. They impossibly overcame all odds and defeated Gecko Moria, warlord of the sea. Kuma sits there and is commanded by the 5 elders that the Straw Hat pirates and everyone else on that island must disappear. The world government commands it. Annihilate them. Kuma calls Zoro out by name. Pirate Hunter Zoro, I'll start with you. And this is Kuma's major test for the Straw Hats, the crew that he believes will change the world one day. He tells Zoro, your crew seems to be quite popular amongst the rabble, which we know to mean that the Straw Hat pirates are loved by the people who are oppressed in this world. I had heard that Straw Hat Luffy has several underlings in his crew who aren't entirely without talent, and this is Kuma's test, to see if they're really, truly ready for the new world. Zoro says, when disaster looms, you've got to step up or shove off. Making excuses isn't going to change anything. If I die here, then I wasn't worth much to begin with. And for the second time, since setting out on his adventure with Luffy to become the world's greatest swordsman, Zoro is completely overwhelmed by the power in this world. Kuma seems to be enjoying himself though, starting into a sumo wrestler's match prep where he stomps both feet and squats in front of Zoro. No mercy. The other Straw Hat pirates butt into the fight because they know it's too much for Zoro, and they love him, and they want to protect him, and they value his dream. This frustrates Zoro a bit because he is putting himself on the line for the sake of their dreams, for the sake of Luffy's dream. He says, I will spare your lives, but in exchange, give me the head of Straw Hat Luffy. If I have his head alone, the government will be satisfied. Obviously, this is something that none of them would ever do. And he uses Ursa Shock, destroying everybody and everything around. And we are on chapter 485, one of the greatest chapters of One Piece. As Kuma goes to pick up Luffy, Zoro moves automatically. Lion Song, a powerful strike that can cut steel that actually inflicts a little bit of damage to Kuma. Kuma explains his current nature as a human weapon, a pacifista. Zoro says, a body like that combined with devil fruit powers, I'm starting to run out of hope. Zoro says, already my body doesn't do what I tell it to do. Something that Kuma is very familiar with, as he's lost his liberation through the process of becoming a human weapon for the sake of the realization of his own dream existing through his daughter Bonnie. Zoro asks him a question. So the only way you'll leave in peace is if you take Luffy's head with you. Kuma says that's the ultimate compromise. But Zoro offers something different. He says, I understand. I'll give you a head. But there's a catch. Take my head instead. Please settle for that. And he bows to Kuma. I can't say I'm as famous as Luffy, but if you consider that someday I would have become the world's greatest swordsman, it can't be too much of a loss to you. Zoro says, the way I see it, that's the only way to save the rest of my crew. What good is ambition if I can't even save the life of my own captain? Zoro fully understands that this is part of the journey of becoming the world's greatest swordsman. That if he turned away from this moment and lost his captain, there's no way that he could ever achieve his dream anyways. That in the process for striving towards his own dream, he's appreciated and realized that the dreams of the people around him are part of his dream as well. That his dream can never be realized if he didn't have them. That their dreams are linked through destiny to his. And to confirm this, he says Luffy is the man who will become king of the pirates. And in this moment, this is when Sanji stands up. Sanji's somebody who's a lot less sure of themselves overall, somebody who doesn't value themselves and their dream yet as much as Zoro. And Sanji says, you're right about Luffy, but what about your dream? What good is dying gonna do, you stubborn fool? Sanji says, take my head instead. And there's an implication in here. Sanji doesn't believe in his dream in the same way that Zoro does. I think Sanji would legitimately die in this moment if he actually took Luffy's pain. But Zoro recognizes a deep connection with his dream with everybody else's dream. I don't think Sanji has that in this moment. And that's why Zoro knocks Sanji out. Because he cares about Sanji. Because he cares about the Straw Hats. Because he cares about Luffy. He knows that Sanji is needed. He knows that Nami is needed. And he knows he's needed as well, but he knows the way that he's needed is that he needs to keep endlessly striving for his dream, just as Luffy strives for his dream to become king of the pirates. He can't turn away. That would mean the end of this shared dream, of this promise. Kuma agrees. He says, I give you my word, I will not take the Straw Hat's head today, but in exchange, I will give you a glimpse of hell. And he takes Luffy's pain, and it creates an extremely large ball of suffering, pain, and anguish. And he says, if you're taking Luffy's place, you have to accept the pain that he's taken. You have to accept his agony. And Kuma gives him a taste, and the pain is unimaginable. Zoro asks to take Luffy's pain somewhere away from his friends, a place that they won't discover him immediately once they wake up. And everybody wakes up and they're like, hey, wow, that's amazing, we somehow got out of that. But Sanji knows that something had to have gone out. Sanji looks for Zoro and he finds them standing there saying, you scared the shit out of me, bro, what's going on? And then when he sees Zoro just standing there covered in blood, Sanji is like, what is all this? How did this happen? Where did Kuma go? And Zoro says, nothing at all. And he says nothing at all because this is all part of the journey. This is all part of the path. This is the path he has to walk if he wants this dream to come true. So this is just a small step to greater things. It is nothing compared to what the Straw Hats and Zoro will be one day. I think Zoro believes that he did what anybody on this crew would or should do because he understands how important they all are to each other, how their dreams are all connected to each other. And the reason Zoro lives lives impossibly, despite Kuma's own expectations, is because Zoro has so much strength through the bonds and promises he's made with Kuina, himself, and his crew. I need to jump all the way forward to Wano, because the battle against King is fascinating in the ways that it expresses Zoro's character development throughout this fight. Zoro's most powerful blade in this fight is Enma, a sword that is literally ripping the life out of Zoro as it unleashes its true power. As Zoro starts figuring out the secret to defeating King, he struggles to control Enma in the fight. He uses his one sword style death line song with Kitetsu 3, which essentially kind of failed to actually damage King, but did manage to take out the flames on his back. When he gets attacked by King, he ends up dropping Kitetsu 3, and as he desperately picks it back up before King descends on him, he remembers the conversation he had with the blacksmith for Kitetsu. He also remembers earning the sword in Loketown, where the sword shop teller tells him that Kitetsu 3 is bewitched. It's cursed. It's something that can inevitably kill Zoro. King kicks him around, and Zoro drops Wado Ichimonji, which he happily grabs again in the middle of this fight, which recalls the memories of that sword to him as well. Sensei, may I have her sword? I suppose so. I'll have to keep the promise for both of us. I'm going to become such a great master swordsman that my name will be known even in heaven. Kitetsu 3's blacksmith tells him that Wado Ichimonji and Enma were crafted by the same man, the blacksmith Shimotsuki Kazaburo. And Zoro realizes that he's kind of an idiot for not realizing why there would be a famous katana from Wano in a tiny, isolated village in the East Blue. Again, King drops him, and this time Zoro's reaching for Enma, which he dropped. Zoro recalls a conversation he had with Momonosuke while he was training. Zoro told Momonosuke, "I was told not to say Sunachi. It's something the old guy in my village told me. I've never said it myself before." And he recalls in this moment that the old man was always sitting there at the coast, a man he never knew the name of. This man died before Kuina died. And so Zoro says, "It wasn't until the day he died that I learned he was Kuina's grandpa." The blacksmith Shimotsuki Kazaburo, he broke the laws and left this land over 50 years ago. 13 years ago, in the East Blue, Zoro's hometown, Frost Moon, known as Shimotsuki Village, Shimotsuki Kazaburo says, while looking out at the coast, "Yes, Sunachi. It is a magic word that summons strength into your heart. In One Piece, Sunachi means throw away your name and wits." This blacksmith, the old man of the village, watches Zoro train with his two-sword style. He gives Zoro some shitty swords because he's not able to make good swords anymore. But he leaves Zoro with some wisdom. Listen closely. Swords like a kitchen knife, but for murder. They're created to kill people. And a blacksmith hones his craft so that his weapons are better at killing than any other. He said a sword has its own personality. So this is essential in understanding Enma and the other cursed swords. A swordsman must master it and bend it to his will. So instead of trying to resist Enma, he needs to take control of Enma. If anything, he needs to be the one dominating Enma, because right now, Enma is the one dominating Zoro. The old man of the village says, "You think a dangerous sword is cursed? No, that's a sign of great quality. When the weak fear a sword and call it cursed, it is a badge of honor." And so that is Zoro's current problem with Enma. He fears it. He fears its power. He fears what it will do to him. Fears that he will lose. He fears that his dream will never come true, and that Luffy's dream will never come true, and Kuina's dream will never come true. They should be frightening. They're meant to cause terrible harm. There was one blade I crafted when I was a young man. It was the greatest weapon I ever made. Its disposition was deadly serious. Just holding it in your hands sent a shiver down the spine. So I gave that masterpiece the name of the king who watches over hell, Enma, the king of the underworld. And Zoro's realizing here that his village was named after this old man. My village is named for Shimotsuki. Was it not a coincidence after all? The blacksmith Shimotsuki Kazaburo became a pirate when he broke Wano's laws and left that land over 50 years ago. And the last thing he remembers about this old man: a great blade can see into you. It chooses only the swordsman who best suits it. And he remembers also the blade merchant who told Zoro, a sword chooses its wielder. And with all that wisdom, Zoro realizes Enma chose him. It chose him so it could test him. And I think if we know anything about Zoro to this point, it's that he loves a test of his skill as a swordsman. With this profound understanding of the blades that he's been carrying, he unsheaths Enma. While speaking to King, he says, "A sword is honest and direct, not wicked. Yes, it's true. It was my strength that was lacking." Does this mean that even with so much haki being drained away, Odin wielded you as though you were as light as a feather? Enma? Zoro thinks, how should I stabilize my haki then? If I have to keep exuding it at this level, it'll kill me. But no. That's perfect. And for the first time in the series, Zoro is able to access Color of the Supreme King Haki. We see Beast Pirates passing out, and we can understand at this point that Enma was thirsty and hungry for this color of Haki. And the core of this newfound power is Zoro's promise to Kuena and promise to his captain and his best friend to become the world's greatest swordsman and to be the person to stand beside the king of the pirates. If you made it this far, that means you probably like what I'm doing here with the channel, so consider supporting me on Patreon for $1 a month. You'll get videos a day early, as well as exclusive content. The same goes for YouTube members as well. On the other side of the world for me right now, there are people who are starving to death. They are suffering from a man-made famine. This is a live stream Holocaust in Gaza, perpetuated by Israel, the United States, and all of the allies involved with those countries, which is most of the Western world. This systematic genocide of babies and regular people with hopes and dreams is something that I literally couldn't have imagined while I was growing up. Nowadays, I know this is happening because there are people in the world who want it to happen, that they gain a material benefit from it happening. It doesn't take much to find out that there are massive corporations that are literally profiting and testing technologies and weapons on these people. Not even One Piece, in all of its suffering and hope that it displays, is able to touch upon the inhumanity of this live-streamed Holocaust. The sheer number of creators that have said nothing completely baffles me. I completely understand that they don't want to lose money, but I don't really find that to be a very justifiable excuse for people that are millionaires, especially. Many of these people in the past have vocally supported various political causes. Not that I think about being anti-genocide as political in a controversial sense. A lot of the people that I've talked about have been vocally supportive of Black Lives Matter back in 2020, Trash Taste in response to Russia invading Ukraine, did a long-ass charity live stream event for Doctors Without Borders in response to that, but nothing for a literal man-made famine. And this goes for so many creators. I mean, I'm bringing up Trash Taste here, but really I can think of almost an infinite number of creators. My two kids watch this huge YouTube creator named Miss Rachel. She basically does kid songs and really early childhood education content. And somehow she is one of the most vocal voices for people suffering in Gaza. I think about these people who have their own hopes and dreams, who desire liberation in a deeper sense than I could ever imagine. I think about them all day, every day. I can't remember the last time I haven't thought about people being bombed and starved to death. And of course, I know there's horrible atrocities happening in Congo and Sudan and various other places as well. But the reality is that the cruelty in Gaza is on a different level due to the power imbalance of stateless, powerless people being killed by the most powerful actor in the region, backed by the most powerful actor in the world. It is horrible. And frankly, with Congo and Sudan, you can guess which other type of governments have their grubby, greedy little fingers in there as well, because it happens to be a lot of the same major players. I appreciate you for listening. It is incredibly difficult, but I'm not giving up, and I'm certainly not letting go of hope. See you next time.